you've all been waiting for.
Pick yourself up and dust yourself down. Open up your eyes and take a look around. I'm standing on the edge, not afraid to look down. Life is a fight. I can see your vultures flying overhead. Rugged bones scattered, my left foot dead. I'm standing on the edge, not afraid to look down. Ooh, yeah. Life is a fight.
Showtime! The moment is now.
All right, well, let's go to our guest now. We've never had a guest live on the air like this with you and me, BC. It's pretty special. He is, he's the man who signs the checks, BC. He is the president of sports and events programming. When you ask, hey, who is in charge of sports at Showtime? It is our next guest. It is the one and only Harvard alum, Mr. Stephen Espinoza. Hi, Stephen. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Do you get that question a lot? You know, who over there is in charge of Showtime Sports? Is it like that tone of disbelief that you just asked it with?
They're like, is that the guy that was feuding with Connor?
Right,
I'm like,
exactly.
it's the guy that was feuding with Connor.
Steve, Ivy League. I didn't know about this side of the bio. All right,
Yeah, Stanford actually. Harvard's the Stanford of the East, but
That's right. Yeah, sorry.
there's only one Harvard.
Right, yeah.
Yes,
That's right. I forgot. My mistake. Okay, well, that in mind, Stephen, thank you for making some time for us. We appreciate it. Let's get right to it with the boxing schedule that got announced on Wednesday. So it seemed to me quite deliberate, right? You had Top Rank coming back, and they were kind of piecemealing the rollout in terms of what fights were coming. Some dribbles of announcements from Golden Boy and Matchroom. You guys decided to come out and say, we're just going to give you the entire rest of the schedule for the rest of the year. It seemed quite deliberate. Talk to me about the strategy there. What were you looking for in making that kind of an announcement in that particular way?
It definitely was deliberate. We said early on that we weren't going to be the first ones back for several reasons, nor were we going to be the last ones back. But one thing we wanted to do is to come back with a high quality schedule of meaningful fights. Sure, we could have come back earlier with fights that didn't quite have the same impact, but that just wasn't interesting to us. That wasn't where we're going to go. We like the idea of trying to impose a little bit of logic and predictability on boxing. I know those are things that don't go with combat sports, but whenever we can, being able to set out a schedule of 5 or 6 months, it's a pain in the butt, but it is absolutely worth it because it just signals that boxing doesn't have to be sort of ad hoc, case by case, fight by fight. We can do this in an organized way that looks like the other major professional sports. I think that's a big advancement for the sport if we can start acting like a professional organized sport, and this is one part of it.
So the big question for me is, inside the UFC, there's a lot of reasons why they've been able to have their premier talent compete. And we could delineate them, but for lack of a better description, essentially they just have more control over that kind of a thing. You've been hearing from a lot of high-end boxers, not all of them, but a lot of them that, like, if there's no gate, I'm not going to compete. Now, I've not heard that specifically from the Charlo twins, but they're of that level of the other kind of boxers who have been saying that. So I guess my question is, you see Top Rank, again, they're out there rolling shows. I commend them for it, but they don't have their premier product. How are you able to, what is the economic mechanism that got these sort of A-listers to be able to compete, including Gervonta Davis and others?
I think what it is really just a mindset more than anything else. And that is, look, we don't know what the future holds. We don't know if we're going to be back in crowds, October, November, December, or whether we'll be doing fanless, into 2021. So in light of that uncertainty, everybody in the sport has one of two choices. Either you can sort of say, look, I'm going to hang around and wait until some undetermined date, and I'm not going to do big fights until we can have crowds back. And I understand there are some of those, Wilder Fury, you're not going to walk away from $10 million plus at the gate. But short of that, what you've seen from everybody on our schedule, and particularly the pay-per-view fights, is they're saying, look, we don't know what the future holds, but we're not going to wait. We're not going to be sidelined, waiting indefinitely. It's not good for the sport. It's not good for these guys' careers. So they're saying, look, if we need to take a little bit of a hit, we're going to. Better to continue to proceed your career than to put it on hold indefinitely, waiting for a day where we can be in front of fans, which who knows when that's going to be.
Steven, there's a ongoing theme of this show. We remove the fourth wall. We don't protect anybody. We bring it. And knowing you personally, that's also your style, your Twitter account. Always riding the edge of probably getting you suspended, and I love that about you. Look, the boxing media 1 year ago, they were writing your obituary from the standpoint of, we love Showtime, great announce team, great production, but they're on the way of becoming the next HBO and getting out of it. And you've heard Bob Arum of Top Rank many times say, cable premier boxing, boxing and premier cable homes, it doesn't work anymore. It works better on big sports networks. And of course, we know PBC splits time with Fox. This announcement, though, I think under the guise of a quarantine, it's an A+. I think even without that, it is so strong because it's competitive. There's variety. There's a lot of good stuff here. Does this say, y'all must have forgot Showtime Boxing, the best in the business at this moment? You had to a little bit of a, 2 words for you when you dropped this.
The reality, it wasn't the primary focus or the objective here was to answer that. But, sure, this sort of removes any questions. And to be clear, the questions really, or the doubts or the rumors of our demise were coming from 2 sources, and 2 sources who weren't particularly objective. They have their own interests in building boxing elsewhere. But neither of those 2 sources have any visibility into our business. So for them to be able to generalize and say, look, the business isn't working for Showtime, that's not a decision. It's not a judgment you can make from outside. So yes, look, is there a little bit of personal satisfaction in doing a schedule this big, in doing a schedule that is more comprehensive, more meaningful, I think higher quality than what anyone's done in boxing before, in this current environment? Yeah, yes, that is job one. But also saying, look, for all those that you doubted, there's a reason we've been here 35 years. We're not going anywhere. We're as committed and enthusiastic, and we know the sport, better than anybody. So, we're not going to answer every sort of criticism. We'll just continue to do what we do and let our work speak for ourselves.
The modern boxing game as we speak right now in 2020, Steven, look, we know the promoters are very tied to their exclusive network. It's created almost like a separate group of leagues. Yes, we do see some crossover at the very highest level. We do see it sometimes at the lowest level in terms of promoters sharing fighters and all that. PBC is in a unique spot with 2 major networks, as I mentioned, Showtime and Fox. What is that conversation like ahead of this launch between you and Al Heyman, the PBC founder, in terms of what fighters are right for Showtime, what fighters are right for Fox? Because I almost see right now that, there's a focused look at certain divisions in the Showtime rollout and, like I mentioned, competitive fights that seem to have, hey, if this guy wins this, he may be fighting this guy down the road on Showtime.
Look, the dynamic is really clear. At Showtime, we want all the best fights. I'm sure they feel the same way at Fox. And it's the same situation with the NFL. CBS wants all the best NFL games, wants to have a better schedule than NBC and ESPN. The reality is there's good events and they can be spread out everywhere. I'm really happy at the quality of our schedule top to bottom, not just the headliners. The headliners are in tough fights, but top to bottom, they're competitive fights and, more importantly, meaningful fights. And I think that is what's necessary right now. I am, in this whole era of the pandemic in those sports, I'm sort of a contrarian. I don't think that there's pent-up demand. I don't think that that's what is going on right now. If anything, it's the opposite. Our audience has pretty much figured out how to exist without us for several months. You never want your audience to get used to not having you around. So we need to come out strong and remind people why they love this sport, and remind people of the best this sport's to offer. Coming out with a schedule of 4, 6, and 8 rounders that aren't particularly meaningful isn't the way to bring sports fans back to the sport after a period of inactivity.
Steven, I want to focus in on the 2 crown jewel events of the schedule that were announced as 2 pay-per-views. The first is the 26th, as I mentioned. It's going to be a pay-per-view doubleheader with both Jermall Charlo and Jermell Charlo. What was the genesis of this idea? I love it because I actually went through and I was searching every boxing online forum I could find, and it was a consistent theme with this event. 1, it was the totality of it, like, oh, we're going to get both Charlo brothers. Okay. 2, it was they both got real fights on their hands. And then 3, that the card was sort of filled out all the way down. This was the one that they highlighted on the Showtime schedule as being the most stacked. So why go so heavy on the 26th with the 2 brothers in this way?
Part of it is an acknowledgement of the economic conditions that we're in. Look, employment is at record numbers. There's a lot of financial stresses, and they really want to deliver value for someone who's going to put down their hard-earned money on this pay-per-view. And the other aspect is, this is an important fight for the sport. It's an important fight for the Charlos in particular, and we wanted to make it feel big. We wanted to get back on the calendar with big events. Like, this idea originally was taking a cue from WWE and what they did with WrestleMania and having 2 nights, and that's where we additionally wanted to do is have one Charlo on Friday night, one Charlo Saturday night, one pay-per-view price for 2 evenings of entertainment. We ran into the same problem that WWE did, which is that there are technical challenges to doing that with cable and satellite companies that I won't bore you with the reasons. It has to do with keeping the pay-per-view window open for more than 24 hours. So once we figured out that couldn't happen, the next best thing, let's turn it into a doubleheader. We see doubleheader, NFL games, doubleheader NBA games, baseball games. We've never seen a doubleheader boxing event. So here we just, knowing the financial challenges a lot of people are under, we want to make sure that this one over-delivered in terms of value during this particular time.
And then the other one, of course, is the Gervonta Davis and Leo Santa Cruz fight. I believe that's scheduled for October 24th, also a pay-per-view. I mean, so there's sort of like a big story about Gervonta, right? The good side, obviously, is I'll never forget when he fought Gamboa in Atlanta at the end of the year. I was actually out with some friends, Stephen, and I was going down 8th Street Northeast in D.C., and every single sports bar had on the fight. I was kind of amazed. I was like, wow, this guy's about to break through, and this is the fight that can help him really enter that next level. Still, he has been getting into a bit of trouble. I think it's not a thing we can ignore. We talked about it a little bit on Morning Kombat. Now, he's been, I guess, out of the headlines more recently, which is great, but still, some of the video was a little bit upsetting. I wonder what your response is to what all has been happening around him.
Look, it was certainly upsetting to us as well. And we, Gervonta is somebody I have a personal relationship with, and we've talked about that incident and similar issues, extensively. I'm confident that he is remorseful and he's committed to do better. Now, he knows he's not going to get many more chances at this point, and only time will tell in terms of whether he's able to avoid those sorts of situations and temptations, and those kinds of conflicts. But if he is, the sky's the limit for him. I mean, look, boxing is filled with stories about unfulfilled potential and distractions and other problems which sort of take promising young fighters on a path that they didn't expect. If he can stay on the straight and narrow, he has proven that he can resonate with casual fans. And he's got that it factor that just can't quantify that draws people to him. He is a charismatic young fighter. I think he's got the world ahead of him if he can sort of stay on the right path.
The other thing that I found about the fight that's really interesting, Stephen, if I may, I don't quite know how this works. It's going to be for the super featherweight title and the lightweight title, so 2 different weight classes at once. How does that work?
Pound title, and Leo's got the 130-pound title. So in order to defend your 135-pound title, all you have to do is weigh in under 135. So if you're fighting actually for the 130-pound title as well, weighing under 130 will satisfy the weight limits for both titles. So the fight will be contested, really at 130 pounds, but the 135-pound title will also be at stake. I think the last time it's been done was Sugar Ray Leonard, so it's been a while. But it's it's an interesting twist on the fight. It brings it to much higher stakes. Not just 2 titles, but 2 titles in different divisions are at stake in that fight.
Steve, I don't want to jump in and nerd you out on Showtime trivia, but let's not forget the Floyd Mayweather-Marcos Maidana pay-per-view rematch in 2014. They did the same thing, putting Floyd's 54 title on. Nice little trick there, certainly adds to the stakes. I want to double back quickly on the Charlos, though. They did a double bill main event with Fox in 2018 and flipped a coin to see who would go on last. The reason why I bring this up is what I love about these guys, they are so insanely competitive that any interview with them at any time can go off the damn rails. They've sent me to hell on my own podcast. It is what it is in the end. How the hell are you going to take these 2 brothers who are competitive against each other and just say, you 2 figure it out? Who's going on last?
That's exactly what we're going to have to do. You probably saw it on the on the Zoom. You could already see them angling, staking out their territories in terms of who goes in the late slot. Jermell clearly hasn't forgotten that he lost the coin toss last time around. But look, I'm not going to get in the middle of it. They are insanely competitive. I don't think it matters all that much. If the second game of an NFL doubleheader isn't necessarily any lower in stature than the first game, I think here you've got 2 really great events. You've got 4 world titles on one pay-per-view card. So I think I'll let them. I'm sure they've whether it's rock paper scissors or arm wrestling or whatever they do in the Charlo house to settle these disputes. This certainly won't be the first one or the last between those 2 guys.
Love those guys, indeed. I mentioned Floyd in passing before. He's still, the biggest brand in the sport whenever he wants to be, and he's got a great relationship with you guys at Showtime, and we know that. If I'm looking at, if I'm playing Showtime Matchmaker in the near future, I still feel like Floyd Conor 2 is the biggest fight you could possibly make. In general, what are your conversations with Floyd? Do you believe he'll fight again and fight, on Showtime pay-per-view in a blockbuster?
I would love for him to do it. And trust me, we've been pressuring him, cajoling him, every verb you can think of in terms of getting him back, whether it's against another Pacquiao fight or McGregor fight or something else. I think the sport is better off when he's around. He brings a level of visibility and awareness that really I think rises. It's the tide that lifts all boats. So I think it would be great, not just for our business and for Floyd's, pocketbook, but I think the sports benefits from that mainstream visibility. Having said that, other than the first 6 months, I don't get the sense that he's actually been that close to coming back. Sure, he's flirted with it and things like that, but at the end of the day, what more can he achieve? I mean, yes, he loves to do big events, and there are big opportunities there. But when you've devoted your entire life to something, including 20 years of being a professional boxer, look, at a certain point, you probably deserve to be left alone. So I've backed off in terms of that. I'm hoping that he still comes back, but there's part of me that's also hoping, look, let him be happy on his own. He's doing a lot of training. He's still in the gym. He's raising his kids. Let him have a life outside the sport.
And he's at an age in his early 40s where, he's done enough. We've seen enough, yet still close enough to greatness that he could pull it off. Other guys, though, Steven, have people worried, like 54-year-old Mike Tyson and 51-year-old Roy Jones Jr. Did Showtime pass on this fight? Now I think it's going to appear on some app here. You got any thoughts on this, Steven, this 8-round exhibition?
We talked to Mike and Kiki and his and their representatives early on, and we given the relationship with Mike and his appeal, we certainly were interested in the event. I think they felt like the financial opportunities might be better somewhere else. I don't think it's fully established yet, but the reality, they had people offering them tens of millions of dollars to get this done. And I think if there's that level of interest on a guaranteed sum, then I'd say, more power to them. Yes, it is a bit of a freak show, but it is Mike Tyson. He's a phenomenon unlike any other. I don't think anyone's going into this, expecting this to be, the biggest and most skilled boxing event they've ever seen. It's a way to enjoy some of the greats again. It's very clearly an exhibition. I don't put it in the same category as sort of the elite fights of today in the sport. But I'm also not going to say that they're not entitled to do it. If they want to come out and entertain and it's done in a safe way, then more power to them.
Stephen, you mentioned something I thought was kind of interesting, which was, that the audience had just kind of been managing without boxing for a time, and you wanted to kind of snap them out of it. And intuitively, that sounds quite right. But the UFC seems to have a bit of the opposite belief, that they have really benefited from the absence, essentially, of alternatives. So which is it? Are they coasting to a higher sort of tide, as it were, because they don't have to worry about football or boxing or anything else? Or how do you reconcile those two different competing visions?
Look, there's certainly a general benefit from not having to compete for attention in a very busy sports calendar. I think there is some benefit to that. And I think they were able to come back relatively early, and I'm sure the fan base appreciates that. But I think, it comes down to quality fights. And I think there are some that think that, look, just come back with anything and people will be so thankful to have it and so desperate that you'll get a pass, that you'll get by. And I guess what I'm really ranting against more than anything else is that sort of expectation. I think as combat sports fans, we should have better expectations for our sport. We shouldn't just be thankful that it's there and say, well, I give them credit for doing something. No, it's fair to request to expect meaningful, competitive fights, high quality fights, and to not watch it if you're not getting that. And I think there have been some UFC events that did great. There have been some that did below what they had been doing pre-pandemic. So I think it really goes to the quality of the events. If you're doing quality events, people will come. I don't think that even at this time you're going to get a pass for doing events that no one really cares about. Even if they're desperate, I think at a certain point it's not going to resonate, no matter how desperate the fan base is.
I do want to talk very quickly, if we can, about the COVID safety protocol that you guys are going to have at the Mohegan Sun. By the way, Bellator will be there tonight, and of course, I guess their August 7th show will be there as well. Can you give us a bit of a detail about that? I recall early in the UFC's run, I think this was during the Jacksonville shows in May, where it became news that they had to sign this waiver. I guess the UFC has really walked that back, but there's no waivers anybody has to sign to get into the Mohegan Sun, right? Like, what are you guys doing to keep people safe, and what are the how did you come up with those protocols?
It's one of the reasons why we waited a little bit longer, so we could see what UFC did, what Top Rank did, what the NBA was doing. That's really been in a leadership position on all this. And see all these other plans. I've probably got a dozen different leagues plans here, and want to see how they played out. So, look, I'm not saying our plan is better, our structure is better. I do think that we've learned and made adjustments based on what we've seen in other plans and in other events. One thing I think that we're prioritizing, the promoters are prioritizing, is more pre-fight testing among fighters. Because the worst thing in all of this is to get those last-minute cancellations. So, whether it's the day before, a couple days before, it's terrible for the fighter to do all that work. It's bad for the audience, and then it's bad for the network as well, because we don't have time to find a replacement. So when I look at the guys of the main event, the guys from our August 1 card, the fighters themselves in their camps have been already tested at least 5 times. I think, main event has been tested 6, and we tested at least 2 more times during fight week. So, as long as we're able to do that with, and it holds with the testing demand, I think that's the biggest difference is, testing on a weekly basis starting 4 or 5 weeks before the fight, so that, we can catch hopefully a positive before fight week and have the greatest chance to get the best quality fights on during this whole pandemic.
Stephen, quickly before we go, the Viacom-CBS merger has made a lot of us closer. Bellator is under the hood now. This show, of course, is as well. We're all related now in some form.
Sort of.
All right, from the waist up at least. Stephen, fans have seen, Bellator back tonight will not be on DAZN, will be on the Paramount Network, which is also in the family. We know that you oversee Bellator. What can you tell us about any future potential? Well, we've seen Strikeforce have a great run on Showtime in the past. To see MMA back on Showtime.
I think that is the goal long term. We certainly not going to put Bellator in a position of breaching their contractual agreement. So when the opportunity arises, I'd love to see the events back on Showtime, as well as across the Viacom company. And I think what's interesting, at least from the combat sports nerd element of this, is we've set a pattern here of how we can collaborate with sort of our affiliated company. We are setting up, one time and staying there for a couple of months. We may extend, we may not, depends on what the situation is. But there's no one else in there. It's same protocols, same lighting grid, same set, same everything. We're just switching out a ring for a cage basically every other week. But I think this will lead to, more synergies between the two. We've talked about, events on the same night, and maybe, intermingled events. I think it's all possible once you're dealing with an affiliated company. And I think there's a lot that we can do to further expand and elevate the Bellator fan base.
Stephen, last question before you. Oh, sorry, DC, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, in closing here, we've been great chatting with you. Appreciate your time for sure. I got to ask for the boxing hardcore here. This quarantine has been hard on a lot of us. It's opened up opportunities. My wife has had me cleaning out the garage. All right, you find some old things, you rekindle old relationships. You look like you're in your office right now at Showtime headquarters in NYC. It's 7 years later. The people need to know, Stephen. Floyd Mayweather, Robert Guerrero, did you find the pay-per-view numbers? Did we break 1 million or not? I think the statute of limitations is passed. We can be honest now, okay? This is,
as we get back to the office, and I haven't been in the office since March 12th, 13th, whatever that was, you basically have to go through an NSA security check and a DOD review in order to be let back in the office, not to mention, any number of tests. So, I will, as we get back in sort of into the work environment, I will make sure everybody looks in all the crooks and the crevices and and maybe we'll turn up an accounting report, and we'll let you guys break it.
Thank you. Can we get Geraldo
Yes.
Rivera involved in this, please? Thank you.
Yes. Got to open up all the tombs. Very quickly before you go, Stephen, I wouldn't want to end on a sour note, but I wouldn't want to forget it either. It was reported just before the show that Nazim Richardson, the legendary boxing trainer, had passed away. Trainer to Mosley, even in the kickboxing world, Badr Hari and some other folks, Bernard Hopkins. Wonder what you made of that, and any comments about the life and the career of Nazim Richardson.
I knew Nazim, a really good guy, very thoughtful guy as a trainer and as a man. He suffered a stroke a while back, and a lot of people thought that might be the end of him training, and it turned out that he continued on. He fought through it and continued to have a lot more successful years. I think he's one of the most thoughtful, underappreciated, and undervalued guys in the sport. Just a really well-rounded guy, who cared about his fighters in and out of the ring. And so his loss will definitely be felt. I'll probably always associate him most with Bernard Hopkins. And the part that I remember about Nazim is, he had a set of code words, as a lot of trainers do, but his were always really colorful. When he's yelling out to Bernard Hopkins, he's saying, he's yelling at him. He's like, pop that chain, swim without getting wet, and all of that meant something to Bernard, and you can try and guess it, but it was just his manner of speaking and expressing himself. It was always colorful. It was entertaining, and it meant something to the fighter. So that's probably what I'll remember about him most in connection with boxing.
Well, Stephen, it's the first time we've had you on the show. First time that Brian and I have had a live guest. Maybe the last time, depending on how things go, but we appreciate your candor. Congratulations on the debut of the boxing schedule. Can't wait to see it, quite honestly. I mean that genuinely. It's been a long winter, so to speak, and it seems like it's going to thaw out a little bit. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
We're going to have to start to maybe we'll do a reveal show on Morning Kombat. We can do it like the NCAA tournament, where we're taking names off the board and revealing things. Let's make this like a 6-hour announcement.
I love it.
Listen,
I love it.
Stephen, we are pathetic, careerist, social climbers, if ever there were some. Anything you want to debut on the show, it's a yes, okay?
Good to know, guys.
There he is, Stephen Espinoza. Thank you so much.
Right.